I'm Tenitra Batiston. Have we just become numb to the L's?
I'm Aaron Freeman, and it's another Therapy Monday, having to deal with the possibility that not only 2025 is in the trash, but also 2026.
I'm Jarvis Davis. And I looked at the film and I am so freaking angry.
ATL! ATL!
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcon Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcon Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Falcon Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiston. Alongside me are Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman and Locked On analyst Jarvis Davis. Our girl, Tori McElhaney, Falcons senior reporter, is a little under the weather. Prayers up for her that she'll get better. She'll be back with us next week. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So how concerned should we be about QB1's injury and QB2's ineptitude? We'll discuss. And why do opponents dominate the way they do? We'll talk about it. Also, is there any way to salvage anyone? We'll download on that. And we'll talk about the defense and what to do on that side of the ball if anything can be done. But first things first, Jarvis, you kind of said it. Aaron, you kind of said it. So let's talk about that before we get into sort of the nuts and bolts of yet another Falcons loss. Speaking of that 30-27 overtime loss to the Carolina Panthers Sunday, we're now about 24 hours removed from it. I was going to ask, are you more angry, confused, frustrated, or hopeless? But Jarvis, I think you already answered that.
No, I mean, when you think about it, I think that I'm angry about what I watched on the film, but I think my biggest concern is Michael Penix Jr., right? Because when you think about that, him getting hurt, and we talked about this on the postgame show. I gave my thoughts and my feels about where the idea of Kirk Cousins coming into the game and where the probability of them actually winning with him being under center. And when I think about it, T, like, that's the part that concerns me the most. I feel like Michael Penix Jr. gives you the best chance to win you football games, give you the best chance to salvage this season in some way. Not talking about making the playoffs. Nope. Those are out the window. And I know Free was already there a week ago. So, but I try to remain optimistic at some point, for this show, because like you said, I need this therapy. But the biggest concern for me, it has to be Michael Penix Jr. going forward, and whether or not he's going to be able to play in this football game when they go down to New Orleans this week.
Okay, we'll talk about Penix in a minute, but if you look at it overall, Jarvis, if you had to put one emotion on how you're feeling at this point, another overtime loss, 5 losses in a row, 2 losses to the Carolina Panthers this season, no wins in the division. Where does that put you emotionally? Angry, confused, hopeless, frustrated?
Super angry. Because just going back and watching the film, when you look at defensively, like where we were, where this team was, coming into this game, having good showings, having situations where they dominated. It was just like the fourth quarter, the 4th and 4 in the fourth quarter was the play that really stood out to me. Running Harrison coming free on the blitz, and Xavier Watts is like 10 yards off the ball. I'm trying to figure out why your safety is so far back on the 4th and 4. You're sending pressure, so it will behoove you to move towards closer to the line of scrimmage where the first down markers are. That's just a down and distance type situation. And for Ronnie Harrison to kind of take a weird angle, he ends up breaking free, but it's too late because Bryce Young already knows where he's going with the football, because Jatavian Sanders is just there wide open on 4th and 4. You have someone running wide open on a quick slant, which they've been running the entire game. specifically for the second half. So when you think about what they were doing and what continued to work for them, it's just a sad song that they were able to convert in that manner. You had no one there to make a play on the football. And Jatavius Sanders was even surprised that no one was there because he was like, oh, he just fell forward for like 3 or 4 more yards. He's like, oh, ain't nobody here to knock my block off on 4th and 4 when the game is on the line. Yeah, it's just plays like that consistently happen, and it makes you angry.
Yeah. And, Jarvis, that's something that we don't talk about enough. So however you want to bring it back into the conversation throughout, and Aaron, same for you, is the situational football and how you'll see basic moves that should be made, basic things that should happen that simply don't. So I think that is definitely something that's a little bit of a challenge. So real quick, Aaron, just wanted to ask you as well, before we kind of dig a little bit deeper into the offensive side of the ball, when you look at things overall and how you're feeling 24 hours later after all that transpired yesterday, compounding on the last 5 weeks, how do you feel? I mean, are you more angry, frustrated, clueless, hopeless? What are you feeling?
Apathy is the feeling I've had for the last 4 or 5 weeks. It's basically been, I care, but I don't care at the same time. It's just one of those things where like, this is what the Falcons have given me for the better part of a decade. And so when they give me more of what I've gotten, I'm just like, oh, okay, this is what this team is. And, I guess you could say it's hopeless. Because like, it's one of those things where it's like, anytime
apathy and hopeless, they go hand in hand.
So they walk down the aisle together.
So anytime I get my hopes up about this team, like they always squander those hopes. So that's kind of how I feel about it. So it's just like, all right, more of the Falcons being mediocre and bad. Okay, I've seen this movie play out so many times. They just keep remaking this movie over and over again, and every year they're like, oh, we put a twist at the end of the movie, and it's like, no, you didn't. It's the same movie. I've seen it before. Like, it's not, you just changed the actor or whatever, but it's the same movie, same script, same director, same cinematographer, same editor, all the same things that this team does over and over again, and it's not different this time. So I guess it's apathy and hopelessness.
Yeah, understandable. And then just going back to what you're talking about,
God. Can I just say this? Like,
yes,
I want to give people a peek into what's going on behind the scenes here. So
yes.
To start the show, to open up the show, like, there was the first comment. I want to read it to you. For those who listening, I know y'all can't see the comments, so I'm gonna bring y'all in as well.
Sure.
We can cancel the show today, give y'all paid leave, because this season is cooked. That was the first comment.
That was the first comment opening the show. And literally, if I may, Jarvis, take a little bit of personal privilege. Aaron, if I may take a little bit of personal privilege, because you know what, Jarvis, Aaron, you guys are right. Our everydayers, they deserve a hug, and they deserve acknowledgement for their pain as well. It's like Dirty Bird Dream ER said, the Hawks are cooking if it brightens y'all's day, and does. What else? We can cancel the show, like you said. And then Dream also said, sorry, I'm just here for the therapy. We got you, brother. We got you.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
This is where we are at this stage of the season. And to your earlier point, Jarvis, what makes matters worse, whether you walked into today angry, frustrated, or whatever your emotion was, it's kind of sitting on pins and needles, waiting to know what's going to happen with the most important position, which is QB1. And trust me, we're watching the Twitter, our colleagues out there who might be in Flowery Branch and may get some additional information. We have a number of collaborators across our squad shows. So if anything happens, we will break it for you guys right here. But as of now, we're moving on the strength of what we know to be the case, which is this, Jarvis. Michael Penix Jr. completed 91.7% of his passes in the first half. Third highest completion percentage by a Falcons QB in the first half in over 35 seasons, minimum 10 attempts. Then he goes down with an injury to the knee. Penix, of course, has that history, torn ACL in 2018. torn ACL in 2020, and then he was hobbled earlier this season. So you think about that, and Jarvis, then it becomes a whole nother level of emotion, because now you're talking about what you alluded to earlier, which is the concern about Michael Penix Jr.'s health.
Yeah, and that's the part that sucks, because I don't know about y'all, but I wasn't surprised he was playing well, because guess what? He's played well at home. He's been consistent at home. The man has played some good football at home. Can we figure out what he does and what's the routine and all that stuff, that so he can take that on the road with him? Haven't quite figured that out yet. But man, when you talk about him potentially not being there, that gives me no hope. Kirk gives me no hope. None whatsoever. He gives me no hope at all. And just watching him and going through, looking at the tape and kind of brought back some old memories. He was not trying to throw the ball to Ocho, but there were times where Ocho was open. And for those you don't know, Aaron, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, Chad Johnson, right? Ocho Cinco.
No. Ocho, not Ocho Cinco. Ocho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the dude. Last name rhymes with Kits. You know what I'm saying? Powell Kits. Powell Kits. Powell Kits. So Powell Kits, was running down the field open, and he would not throw the ball. He decided to throw it to David Seals. You know what I'm saying? You can take that how you will. When it comes to being a viable option, and then later on in the game, you throwing the ball to him, and he's not able to catch the football, and it just makes you. It just puts you in a place where when and then you remove Drake London from the equation, the guy that Michael Penix has the best chemistry with. He's able to find him in all type of situations, right? No matter what type of routes he's running. I feel like with Michael Penix potentially not being there, and it seems like I get the vibes that he's probably going to at least miss this New Orleans game.
Yeah.
And you going back to essentially have to change your entire game plan for the most part when it comes to play calling standpoint, because there were some throws that Kirk made, and I know that Michael Penix can make those, and Kirk can't make those throws anymore. And I can't even make a case that he probably made those at his peak, when he was at his peak, because we know about Michael Penix's arm strength. So that now we're asking Zach Robinson to adjust on the fly. And we know what that is or what that means. And the answer to that has been he can't, for the most part.
Yeah.
Majority of the season. So yeah, I'm big concerned, T. I don't see any light at this moment.
Yeah. And it's tough to be anything but discouraged, because you're thinking about the fact that knee injury could be a season ender. We don't know. And if you're thinking about it from the perspective of, for example, ESPN sources saying that Penix might seek a second opinion, and don't get me wrong, second opinions, especially in this case, are fairly standard. So I'm not overly, to me, that's not overly news. That's not overly breaking news, if you will, because in this case, regardless of whether there's just a 1% chance of you making the playoffs, it's not just about Michael Penix and what that would mean for him as a season-ending injury. We're talking about the fate of the franchise that doesn't have a first-round pick next year, and who is still saddled by, to Jarvis's point, a gazillion-dollar backup QB that's not even playing, kind of like QB3 from what we saw for the most part yesterday. So, I mean, when you look at it in its totality, we're not just looking at next week. We're looking like, oh dear, what might this mean as far as the rest of the season or even next season, because you got Kirk Cousins showing what he showed. I mean, how concerned are you about what this means if Michael Penix can't go?
Yeah, obviously we're going to hope for some good news on that second opinion, and hopefully it's not as serious as some of the rumors and reports out there that, potentially this could be another ACL tear with Michael Penix. And, let's entertain that possibility right now. And again,
Yes.
we'll see the severity of all that and stuff. But if you just sort of take it as a standard ACL tear, typically the timeline for recovery for an ACL tear is about 9 months, right?
Yeah.
Before players are let back on the field. You do the math. Okay, if he has surgery next week, that means 9 months from now will be the end of August. It will be at the end of training camp. And that probably means that he won't be able to play in training camp. He won't be taking those first team reps all off season long.
That
So
part.
even, so much of this season was built around, all right, you got to find out if Michael Penix is your long-term answer at the quarterback position. That potentially is now out the window. And then you were hoping, okay, even if this year doesn't go the way you want it to go, maybe with a different coaching staff or whatever, you go into next year and you can get some type of boost in Penix's third year, and maybe then he'll be able to prove he could be the long-term answer if that's not definitive by year's end. And now that's in jeopardy if this injury is as serious as some of the rumors and reports are indicating. If he's going to miss most of the offseason, he's not going to be your week 1 starter next year. And so that means that the Falcons have to bring in a bridge quarterback. That could be Kirk Cousins. I doubt it's going to be, because Kirk Cousins is, I think the cap hit on him next year is over $50 million. The Falcons are not going to, keep Kirk Cousins at that cost unless Kirk can go out here over the next 7 games and look like MVP level Kirk Cousins, which doesn't seem to be on the horizon. So you're moving on from Kirk Cousins this offseason. You got to bring in somebody else to be a bridge quarterback. As much as I love the Eastern shtick, it's not going to be the long-term answer in terms of the bridge quarterback. So you got to bring in somebody else. And so that puts Michael Penix's status in jeopardy, his future in jeopardy, because there's a possibility that new person could come in here and play well enough to basically, when Penix is healthy and ready to go next year, he may not be able to see time on the field because the other guy is doing a decent enough job, to keep that spot on lock or whatever. So, it's a real possibility. We'll see how it goes, but it's possible that we just saw Michael Penix play his last snap as the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday. And, that puts this team's future very much in flux at this point. You don't know what the future leadership is going to be in the front office, at head coach, and now at quarterback. You don't know what that situation is going to look like. And so, again, we hoped, this is obviously me dooming and glooming at this point in time. We hope that we get some good news over the next few hours, but that's really kind of what is at stake. And so this team is just sort of twisting in the wind at this point in time. And there's no real solution in sight at this point.
And to add to what you're saying, Free, like I said that the saving grace for Terry Fontenot probably was Michael Penix and the hope that he gives this team of being that franchise quarterback. This dims that light tremendously.
Yeah.
Because it's based off of the scenario you just gave, well, if the guy they bring in plays really well, and it's a possibility that this could be a different coaching staff because, he should be.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Because there's a little more to dig into that. I love where you're going with it.
Yeah.
And so put a pin in that one, because I think when we circle back to talking about the decisions, Jarvis, you just hit the nail on the head. That puts a whole nother layer on how Arthur Blank might decide to proceed with these coaches and with these players. The front office for later on this season. So absolutely want to dig a little deeper into what you're talking about. But we also have a few other questions that we want to throw out there as it relates to where this offense is, why they're there, and where they can go. And we'll talk about that, and we'll take that under further review. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. So if you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I mean, say yes to it and make that switch and get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same number and contacts. And you'll love that you are getting the same quality service you had before, but for a fraction of the price. The setup is super easy. You keep your number and you're running in minutes. So are you ready to say yes to saying no? We'll make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigs on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Thank you for making the Falcons postcast rather your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Appreciate you guys for always rocking with us. And there were so many like little nuances, Aaron, that I didn't want us to kind of overlook from that offensive perspective, because if you think about it, we kind of started talking about, hey, what's the level of concern about Michael Penix Jr.'s health? And if you think about that injury, that knee injury, that history, coupled with the fact that you've now been dealing with Kirk Cousins, there are kind of a couple of questions out there, but one that I wanted to ask you guys first out of curiosity, and that is Kirk Cousins going into the shotgun. As soon as he took over, I don't know that it really made a world of difference, but just going back to the Kirk Cousins conversation, are you concerned about Michael Penix Jr.'s long-term health and Kirk Cousins coming in? His health ain't that great. It's exactly not 100%, and maybe how those things limit Zach Robinson in how he's able to proceed?
I mean, it was interesting to sort of see the Falcons do some under center stuff with Kirk Cousins in the game when they haven't done really any with Michael Penix. And one of those talking points has been, why haven't they done under center stuff with Penix? And right. Zach Robinson's statement has been, Penix is not comfortable with it. And so yesterday, seeing Kirk Cousins do some under center stuff when they're not doing that with Michael Penix does lend credence to that. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to sort of see what this offense looks like with Kirk Cousins at the helm, if he's going to be the starter for the foreseeable future, which it does appear that is going to be the case at this point. Just because, like, I didn't think last year's offense was really well structured for a Kirk Cousins offense, right?
Yeah.
Like all the things that Kirk did well in Minnesota, the Falcons really didn't do a ton of that here. And now that you're sort of having to potentially have a do-over midway through the season and having to make that adjustment on the fly, and as Jarvis has pointed out, like, adjustments have not been Zach Robinson's strong suit, right. Whether we're talking about within a game and week to week with this team, it doesn't bode particularly well for what this offense is going to be moving forward with Kirk Cousins at the helm. So I think there's still a lot of questions with Zach Robinson, and really, you know, for me, this back half of the season was, okay, are we going to see growth from Michael Penix? Are we going to see growth from Zach Robinson? That at least there was maybe that slim possibility of some upside and potential if Zach started to figure it out. And now that's kind of out the window. And then now you're just like, okay, well, running it back with Kirk Cousins. And it's like, well, you know, maybe that works out. You know, I'm going through the different scenarios.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm like, you know, well, there was a chance that like maybe that would get Darnell Mooney going, because him and Kirk had such a strong rapport last year, and that has been a big part of why this offense has struggled, because it's basically been a one wide receiver offense, and now that Drake may be out, it's like, okay, I guess maybe that jump starts Darnell Mooney next week. We get a good version of Darnell Mooney and be like, oh, Darnell, it's nice to see you. You finally decided to show up in 2025. Appreciate you, my guy. It's about 11 weeks too late, but hey, man, you know, you doing your thing. And again, I know the collarbone and all that stuff, but like that's all I got. You know, like maybe get a good Darnell Mooney game next week. But I've been saying that for like 8 weeks at this point in time. So,
well, it's something better happen real fast, because we just both got word and confirmation, because what we do here is make sure that we've got sources that are reputable. and making sure that we have definitive information. So when you hear from a guy like Ian Rappaport confirming that Michael Penix Jr. is headed to IR, then we could have that conversation. So just 15 minutes ago, when we were talking about this, that wasn't a confirmation. That was just a confirmation of what we already knew from yesterday, which was that the injury was obviously a serious one and that there would be a second opinion. Now that we know, Jarvis, and Aaron, I want you to come back in and weigh on it as well. Now that we know for sure he's headed to IR after aggravating a bone bruise and knee sprain from earlier in the season. And we talked about that too. Additionally, there has been damage to the ACL, which could mean that full reconstruction, which is unfortunate because we're talking about somebody who's already dealt with that twice in his career. And so, and again, Jarvis, keep us honest as a show. When we get back to this in the fourth segment, we got to talk about how that impacts Terry Fontenot, Raheem Morris, and what happens to them going forward. But let's talk about it from just the basic perspective, which is the reaction to this news and now knowing what this could mean or what this will mean for the Falcons, not just in this upcoming week's game against the New Orleans Saints, where Kirk Cousins will obviously be under center, but what it means for the rest of this season and potentially going forward with the severity that Rappaport just mentioned.
See, the season is cooked. You know, this season is cooked.
Yeah, let's just keep it real.
Yeah, it is cooked because when you think about the only optimism that I had for this team, you know, Michael Penix was the start of that. He was the QB1. That
Absolutely.
was the beginning. And then you kind of morphed into the whole defensive aspect and Jeff Ulbrich being, you know, who a competent defensive coordinator, right? Like this last game, it was a little shaky, but I think overall, like I feel like that was a good hire. And when you talk about the only saving grace, you know, of this season, you know, even though the playoffs were pretty much out the door, like when you lose a guy like Michael Penix and that last piece that you mentioned about reconstruction, that's where I get really concerned. What are you going to look like when you come back from this? At what point will you come back from this? Aaron laid it out beautifully. It's a 9-month deal that takes you all the way up to basically the beginning of preseason.
And that's your best case scenario.
And that's best case scenario with barring any type of setbacks or anything like that throughout the whole rehab process. And then the general manager, I'm just going to say the general manager of this team is going to have to make a decision, right? Because you can't move forward because you don't have a first round pick. We know what the odds are. You find the guy in the second, third, on down. We know what the odds are there. And thankfully you have Kirk Cousins' money coming off the books.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, you know, more than likely that's a 99% probability. So it's just, it forces you to partly move on from him, right? Because you have to go with what you have right now because you're trying to win games. Okay, and then who's the coach? I know we're going to get into it a little bit later, but all these things have to kind of be going through the general manager of this team's mind, like not right now, because he's not going to be here for the rest of the season. And I said this. We had conversations about this on Locked on Falcons and on the Squad show. At the end of the year, we would need to know who and what Michael Penix Jr. is going to be for this team going forward. You need to have a really good idea. And I feel like for the most part, he was headed towards, hey, I can be a viable starter in this league. And then whatever the ceiling is after that, you know, that will be determined going forward. But now I have questions because of what you talked about. He had a big time injury history at Indiana. For the most part, he was healthy at UW. Last year, a few games that he played, no issues.
Right.
And then he had this injury kind of, sort of early on that he was dealing with. And now, boom, here we go. The deep bone bruise, done for the year. And this injury doesn't do anything but make me even have more questions now, T, that we're here. Now that it has been confirmed, I have so many more questions now about this team and its future, because we were already questioning the coach coming to the game.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the general manager and the questions we have for him going forward. It's just too many. It's too much stuff that's up in the air about this team at this point, and we're only halfway through the season.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Aaron, you think about the optimism at the beginning of the season, and our number one reason, I guess 1A and 1B, right? Because 1A, depending on who you are, would have been Michael Penix Jr., and 1B was probably a combination of Jalen Walker / James Pierce Jr., or a flip of that, right? Well, now we're dealing with just one of them being effective, because Michael Penix Jr. is no more. James Pierce Jr. seems to disappear and not reappear enough. Jalen Walker's giving you what he could when he's out there, and it's good when he's out there. So now you're faced with the fact that for sure, one of those three that you were counting on to make this a stellar season from what I like to call the rookie class and the rookie class 2.0, he ain't it, because he's done. So now you're like, okay, fine. Where do you go from here? Not just for next week against the Saints, not just for the rest of the season, but man, Free, it's like you already kind of did. It's got you looking into the future, wondering what now?
Yeah, there was certainly a conversation that we could be having about, yes, this season is cooked, right? To borrow the parlance. But there's a possibility that, things could go better in 2026 and beyond once guys are healthy, once, whatever changes at the top of the organization are made, and the future is bright for the Falcons. Now that's all in jeopardy, right? As we discussed with Michael Penix and his status, and that now potentially, him not necessarily being the week 1 starter in 2026, and you don't know what that situation is like. And then, we're going to talk about it later, but if you change your defensive scheme, this was something I talked about after the draft with Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. Like, those are two players that not everybody's going to have the same opinion of those guys. And so there's a real possibility that you bring in a different coach, and they're going to have a different vision for what they see Jalen Walker and James Pierce as. And so even if you're looking at both of those guys as two ascending players, as I think most people are, that have bright futures ahead of them, that's not guaranteed, because another coach could be like, well, you know what? I come from an organization that we looked at Jalen Walker more as an off-ball linebacker, and we really like him in that role. And they could look at James Pierce and like, no, we want bigger, more physical edge rushers, and he's only a DPR. And then that raises the question, is he going to be a good enough designated pass rusher, to see the field where you could potentially bring in another player? And so all of a sudden, all these positives that you had going into the season, and midway through the season, you're like, okay, the arrow's still pointing up, even if it isn't, we're not getting there as quickly as maybe we want to. Now that's all in flux. And so you're at a position right now, again, going back to the earlier point, where, still a lot of things have to happen, but there is no real anchor point right now for the Atlanta Falcons. Like, the only two entities that you could look at this team right now where it's like, we know for sure these guys are going to be here, is basically Bijan Robinson and Drake London. And that's really about it at this point in time. And then everything else is pretty much in flux at this point with the Atlanta Falcons. And so this is basically, potentially, and again, obviously we'll talk more about this, but if you're going to be selling a new group of decision makers, whether that's a head coach, GM on the future, all you can really sell at them at this point in time is Bijan Robinson and Drake London. Now, again, that's not a bad starting place to be, especially if you're an offensive-minded person. But that's not going to necessarily be like, oh man, this Atlanta team, this is definitely a team that has a bright future. Maybe if you get the right person in here and bring in the right personnel and all that stuff. But there's just so many things that so many unknowns with this team right now that, this perpetual optimism that we have about, the future being bright for this Falcon team is now very much out of, it's an unknown. There's too many unknowns at this point.
Exactly. It really, really is. And what also makes it a frustrating unknown is the fact that, yes, as it's devastating to know that QB1 is done, but there are still other issues that don't have anything to do with QB1 completely that are also of concern for this Falcons offense, especially in what we saw even in the first couple of possessions yesterday, and some of the things that we've seen throughout the course of this 5-week stretch of losses that we need to unpack, and we will. Next up. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel. And think about it. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And if you were around for that Hawks-Suns game yesterday, you saw the Hawks with an amazing fourth quarter comeback. Think about how much more exciting that game would have been if you were taking advantage of FanDuel. So again, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Jarvis, we wouldn't be right, and we would be remiss if we tried to act like the woes of the offense for this team were all resting at the foot of Michael Penix Jr. or a lack of Michael Penix Jr., if you will. But you can't really do that when you look at a couple of different things. The first 4 possessions of the second half yesterday: fumble, punt, punt, punt. And then you think of only 6 offensive plays in 2 losses in overtime. So what happened yesterday? And then when you look at it in its totality, even the last 2 overtime losses, why has this offense not been able to get it done in the critical moments when the other team is?
It's always one guy missing his assignment. It's 10 guys doing exactly what they were supposed to do and one not. Whether it be a I forgot what I was calling. Ocho, Kyle Pitts, I say his name. Kyle Pitts missing the block, Kyle Pitts dropping the ball, or Kyle Hinton missing a block so Bijan Roberts can take that bad boy 60 to the house, because that's just how close they were in certain moments, and them not being able to make those necessary plays. It just kind of speaks to the comedy of errors. Our old boss, Sean Thompson, text me that phrase right there, and I think it just speaks to just who this team is when you look at where they are right now and how close they are, but they are just so far away from just being a consistent team. And I think that, just those little miscues that they have on certain plays from time to time, they just all add up to being done at the wrong moment. Defense had a lot of them, but just speaking from the offensive standpoint, it's just those guys just not being in the moment and not being locked in to make the play when they need to make plays. And when you have QB1 out and you have your backup quarterback, I don't care how good Kirk has been in this league, like he's a shell of himself. The man looked 50. He's throwing like he's 50 years old. So when he does get it to you, catch the doggone football. This is just one of those things where, like, you're not this good to overcome those mental errors, those little mistakes, or just picking up that extra block, making the catch when you're supposed to. You're just not good enough to overcome that. And that has showed up in these last 2 games when they haven't been able to win in overtime. It's just the little things that makes teams good to great, and the little things that make teams average to below average to bad. And the Falcons have been the latter when those moments have come about.
Exactly. And yeah, Free, that's why we kind of have to look at it in its totality and not just place the blame at the feet of Michael Penix Jr. or the lack of having a Michael Penix Jr., because ultimately you as an offense are have the responsibility of fumble, punt coming out of the gates in the second half yesterday. You as an offense in its totality had 6 offensive plays in 2 losses in overtime. So, I mean, what is it about this offense that just can't make that one play or get it right in that one situation to be able to just get over the hump?
Yeah, this is not a very detail-oriented team. That's the only thing you can really explain it as, where it's just like this team is not always locked in when they need to be locked in, and you just go back to, those series that you're talking about in the second half where, right before Penix gets injured on that play, he hits Darnell Mooney on the back shoulder throw. It hits Darnell Mooney in the chest. He drops it. Right? That's a first down. And instead of having a first down, it's 3rd and 11. Carolina brings the blitz. Tyler Algier misses a blitz pickup on that particular play, and Penix gets injured on that particular play. And we've seen this team really struggle to have good answers when teams blitz them. That's been an issue since we talked about it in that 49ers game back in week 7. And it's been a through line that they haven't been able to solve. Then you get Kirk Cousins in the game on the next series. You get a 3rd and 1. You want to line up and run the football, get a yard, right? If you're a good offensive line, a good running team, you should be able to get a yard. They can't get a yard. Once again, that right side gets blown up. Tigun Quitoriano and Elijah Wilkinson missed their blocks, and Bijan run, defenders right in Bijan's face, and even Bijan can't, walk on water to avoid that defender. So that series is over. Then, next series you have a 3rd and 8. Kirk throws it over to the middle to Drake London. Drake London drops the ball. It's a little high, but you have an opportunity. Now, fortunately, you get a pass interference on that particular play. But then, the next time you go out there, Kirk tries to throw a similar play to Darnell Mooney. They don't call DPI on that one. That was a far more blatant DPI.
So
but the refs were like, well, we were only allowed to throw one flag. So what do you want us to do? So we already threw the flag. So we're not going to call this one.
Yeah, it's kind of like a make good situation.
Yeah. So they threw the flag on the wrong one, but and then Kirk is just like, screw it on the ensuing play. I'm just going to throw it up, and maybe Darnell Mooney can make me look good like he did in that week 5 game last year when I threw it in the triple coverage and he made the big catch on that play against the Bucks. And he throws it in triple coverage this time. This is a different Darnell Mooney. That ain't the same dude. So now and so it's just those things where it's just like, as Jarvis broke it down, like you can just go through each series and be like, that guy blew his assignment, that guy blew his assignment, that guy blew his assignment. And as we said on the post game, and as Jarvis just said, like, this team isn't good enough to overcome those issues. They don't have the offensive scheme where it's like, don't worry, because I'm going to make a comparison, and I know people are going to be like, this is a ridiculous comparison, but like you go back to that 2016 team when they had Kyle Shanahan, and that team gave up a lot of sacks that year, right? Because Kyle Shanahan's philosophy was like, look, we can give a 6-yard sack. It don't matter because I'm going to get 30 yards on the next play because I'm going to scheme it up, right? And so we can live that sort of live by the sword, die by the sword until they didn't in a game that may or may not have happened later that year in February. But I don't know what you guys talk about. But, like this team can't do that. This team has to be very methodical. You run the ball on first down. If they get 2 yards, that puts them behind the chains, and that starts a domino effect where this team is not able to overcome those issues because you don't have that type of schemer that can be like, well, I can scheme up a 15-yard completion pretty easily. That's not what this team is with the offensive line, with the run game, with the receivers, with the quarterback play. All of these things that were, a lot of these things were going in their favor a year ago are going against them this year. And you don't really have the coaching that can make up the difference for that. And so it's just a lot of just like little things and not being cued in on the details, whether it's caught passes, blocks, making the right throws, making the right reads. all of the above with this team and why they continue to fail offensively.
And guys, I just want to ask one quick follow-up before we wrap up. And Jarvis, Aaron, you guys just weigh in on this. But in speaking about Drake London, if you will, and just getting some news again from Ian Rappaport, who is saying that Drake London is out at least 1 week with a PCL strain, right? So you're looking at that injury, and that's another blow. And you're thinking about the fact that Matthew Bergeron was inactive Sunday. So I'm just asking you guys, how the Falcons' underwhelming performance on that side of the ball can be attributed to those types of absences, whether it's to come with Drake London or whether it was with Matthew Bergeron. And again, I'm not suggesting that that's the total reason for it, but just saying, like, in all honesty, does that play more of a factor or less of a factor in what we're talking about as far as their offensive woes?
Oh, it's a big time factor. When you take Drake London out of this offense, you don't have no offense. Because guess what? Drake London offense, this offense sans Drake London, guess what that does? 8 in the box, man coverage. What you gonna do? That's what that like. This just made whoever the defensive coordinator is for the New Orleans Saints. This just made his life easy. All right, guys, here's what we're gonna do. And you know, I talked about that on the post game show yesterday. It's like the Falcons never have an answer for when teams go into the halftime, go in the locker room at halftime, and just say, "All right, guys, here's what they're doing. So here's what we're going to do." And that has happened. They didn't even get to halftime before the game even being thought about. The game plan is being implemented, and we're already talking about, this defense coordinator, his game plan is set, and that's what I would do. I'm saying, man, we're gonna play man, and we're gonna put 8 in the box. Figure it out. We're gonna make Kirk Cousins make throws. We're gonna make your wide receivers make plays, beat man coverage, find some separation, so Kirk can have room to throw the football. Good luck with that.
Yeah, the injuries certainly play a part in it, but injuries happen in the NFL. You got to overcome it, right? We talk about Bucs week 1, no Tristan Wirfs, no Chris Godwin, right?
True.
Didn't stop Baker Mayfield from throwing for 3 touchdowns in that game. And like, that's the thing when you look at the successful teams, they can overcome the injuries because they have some X factor, again, pointing the finger at coaching, where it's like, okay, well, I'll be able to figure out how to scheme open David Sills or Casey Washington or Charlie Warner or something like that. And again, no one's sitting here saying like, oh, those guys are going to get 10 catches, and that's the proof that you're a good play caller. But like, we just need a pick me up here or there. And we talked about this in the post game. Carolina had no problem. Mitchell Evans, like, he's the 3rd tight end for Carolina. And this man was carving up the team. Jatavian Sanders, Tommy Trimble, right? Bryce Tremaine, Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette ain't done nothing this year. And then all of a sudden,
he was out there balling.
Yeah, killing the Falcons.
Killing Natron Brooks.
Yeah, and so like, you see it when you can good coaching overcomes these issues to a certain extent. Again, it's no one's sitting here saying that you can just get 11 guys off the street and then like, oh, give them to Andy Reid and he's going to take them to the Super Bowl. But it is one of those things where it's just like, if all you're talking about is like, oh, we're down 2 or 3 starters, like most NFL teams are like, yeah, we deal with that on a weekly basis. But with the Falcons, it's kind of the death knell for this team because they don't have the capacity to overcome these issues.
They don't have the capacity to overcome those issues, but they better figure out how to have the capacity, because on defense, it's not getting any easier with them as it relates to injuries. And you got to wonder too, even with all the injuries that are mounting and everything else that this Falcons staff, front office, and sidelines is facing, does it even really matter? Talk about that next. So, guys, for the last few weeks, the defense has made maybe some good ones too, look otherworldly again. So whether it's Bryce Young torching him in the air, Jonathan Taylor on the ground, I mean, the defense has just been cooked in certain areas at certain times. So I guess just quick question and kind of a 2-parter. So, Aaron, what has changed for this formerly number one pass defense and one of the top defenses in football in the Falcons. But on the same token, if we give deference on the offensive side, how much of that has been about the absences like a D. Alford or Mike Hughes, Zach Harrison, et cetera?
Well, I think Divine Diablo is the one injury that has been.
Yeah, and I think I'm right because I'm thinking about the more recent ones, Free, but you're right. The first one is probably the most critical in Divine Diablo.
Yeah, the reason I point out Divine Diablo because like the truth of the matter is like Mike Hughes has not played well for like the last month. So that's contributed to the decline. So it's hard for me to sit here and be like, oh, well, you don't have Mike Hughes. That's really been a problem because I was watching Mike Hughes get cooked for like 3 straight games. And then I watched Natron Brooks get cooked yesterday, and I'm
being
like,
nice when you say Natron Brooks got cooked.
Yeah, I'm just
nice.
sitting here saying like I've seen the Falcons CB2 get cooked for like a month straight. So like I don't, again, as much as we want to sit here and be like, yeah, Natron Brooks cost the Falcons a game, which is fair, but like at the same time, like this ain't a new revelation for this defense. At this point,
Can I just interject just a little bit? I gotta get this off my chest because it's burning me up inside.
Okay.
This man lined up 7 off the ball. As soon as the ball was snapped, he was 10. This man ran, I think Ted McMillan ran a 20-yard out, bro. And when he caught the ball, he still was Natron Brooks was still 6 yards away from him. And it ended up being a 30-yard gain, dog, on first down. Like, I'm trying to figure out, man, I don't understand. Like, football it can be complex. Sure. It can definitely be complex. But, man, when you're talking about alignment, like technique, looking inside, for what? Your man right there. They were playing the matchup. Ulbrich was playing the matchup zone for most of that game, right? Like, he couldn't play man as much as he probably wanted to for obvious reasons. But when you get into those particular situations, Natron Brooks, I just don't understand what he was thinking. And that hurts me that I can't see that, because it means that you have no clue about the situation, what's going on, like the amount of cushion that you're giving this man, like he can run past you. I guess since Xavier Legette did it, or Leggett, whatever, how you doggone pronounce his name. Mm-hmm. I'm just dumbfounded by like what I'm seeing, because there was a guy that played early in the game, looked all right to me, and he looked like he can match up a little bit, from a height standpoint, you can get up in there and mix it up a little bit. But yeah, I just had to get that out my chest, because that really bothered me in my session this morning, watching this doggone game again.
Okay. Well,
sorry.
What I was going to say until I was rudely interrupted. Right? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Jarvis. No, but like you're right, Jarvis. Like all of these are issues. Basically, what I was going to say though was, like, to me, the superpower of this defense we saw fully on display against the Buffalo Bills when they were able to blitz Josh Allen, and Bills didn't have good answers for the Falcons blitz, and they were able to take advantage of that. Basically, to me, what we have seen occur is like offenses have been like, oh, okay, this is what the Falcons do. So we're going to implement things that will basically neutralize their blitz. If we can run the football, which teams have been successfully able to do, with the exception of Sunday, and then we'll implement a quick passing game. And that's something that Carolina was able to do to the tune of 782 yards, whatever Bryce Young wound up with on Sunday. And so, like, if you can basically, down a distance, stay ahead of the chains, and the Falcons can't get you in a 3rd and long situation where they can really pin their ears back and get after the goal. Because when you look at a lot of these sacks that the Falcons are racking up, it almost always is in those 3rd and long situations when they can really send the house as a blitz. And I think ultimately, and this is true of any team that is reliant on the blitz in order to be effective, that historically speaking, those teams tend to start strong and then fade because offenses kind of get the book and like, okay, these are the blitzes that they like to run, and here's how we defeat that. And I think what you're seeing right now is this defense kind of coming back down to earth a little bit, because their superpower has kind of been negated a little bit because offenses have been able to adjust. And so I think the injuries are contributing to that, especially the Divine Diablo, because especially you could play that style, that aggressive style, if you knew you could man up guys on the back end, and the Falcons can't really do that with all the injuries that they're dealing with, as Jarvis was putting it. But at the same time, I also sort of think this sort of live by the sword, die by the sword identity that their defense has had is eventually going to run out of steam unless you really have the horses to run it. And I don't think the Falcons, in part due to the injuries, really have those horses.
Yeah. And Jarvis, when you think about like what we're saying in terms of the injuries and how it relates to the impact that it's had offensively and defensively and low-key special teams, because earlier in the season, Marquise Williams was having to play a little bit of patchwork, do a little bit of patchwork himself. But now, even from the moment that we started the show to where we are now, because remember, we said we were going to put a pin in this until the end of the show, and then news just kept coming about Michael Penix Jr. and now Drake London. You got to think about this. Divine Diablo goes down very, very early in the season. Caleb McGarry is done for the season before the season gets underway. And then it's just injury after injury after injury. How does that impact Arthur Blank's ability to make a decision? Because we are at the point where you have to legitimately think about whether or not he brings back Raheem Morris. Or if he brings back Raheem Morris, does Raheem Morris bring back one, two, all three, or none of his coordinators? Do you bring back Terry Fontenot, et cetera? How do these developments, even of not just the last 5 weeks of losses, but even meaning win-loss, but the last 24 hours of losses player-wise, how does all that impact Arthur Blank's decision-making on who he retains? And then we, of course, still have 7 weeks of the season, but there's that.
Yeah. I think that one of those two guys, Terry Fontenot or Raheem Morris, will be gone. And I think that I will have to lean towards Terry because he started this whole quarterback fiasco. We got two quarterbacks. We good, man. We're gonna have Kirk gonna be here for 2 years. He's gonna ball out. We're gonna go to the playoffs and all end the streak and all this stuff. And then Michael Penix gonna step right on in 2 years in, and you still have potentially 3 years left on his contract and gonna be great, potentially win a Super Bowl and all that stuff. None of that has played out. Kirk Cousins, he's been stealing money for the past year, whatever. And then Michael Penix is done for the year. And we don't know what he's going to be or who he's going to be, when he comes back, and it's looking like more than likely he probably won't be back to start the season next year. So, all right, what does the salary cap look like for you bringing in a $14 million quarterback? Because, hey, those what bridge quarterbacks now. The price of the brick went up on bridge quarterbacks. That's for sure. I.e., see Daniel Jones. If you question that fact. So I think that the orchestrator of this whole two quarterback thing is going to have a lot of questions to answer at the end of the year. You have to start there, right? And here's a scenario for potentially Raheem saving his job at least for a year. Hey, man, you're going to have to fire your special teams coordinator. He got to go. And then you're going to have to fire your OC as well. Because bringing some experience, bro. Like, you hired two first-time play callers as your coordinator, and you thought that was okay. That was Dan Quinn's ultimate downfall. He thought Dirk Cutter can figure this thing out. No, He was experienced, true enough, but it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. I feel like Jeff Ulbrich is a fit as a DC for this team. And I think that Raheem needs to plead and beg to say, hey, man, I figured out a way. I figured out the right guy for this defense. Now give me the opportunity to figure out my right guy for my offense and my right guy for my special teams unit. And, hey, and if I'm not able to get it right, then you got to make your decision. But I think that it starts with Terry Fontenot because this whole quarterback stuff has been ugly just from a financial standpoint and just from a public perception standpoint. And we know how big the Falcons are on public perception.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think they should clean house. Everybody's got to go, right? And I'll even throw my guy Rich McKay under the bus. Like, Arthur Blank, it ain't working, and so I don't think Rich McKay's
part of the football operation.
He ain't part of the football operation, Jarvis. But if Arthur Blank wants to to buy back credibility from this fan base, because every time years like this happen, everybody starts being like, wait a second, this has been a consistent trend. And then all of a sudden, it's like, it's not just the coach, it's not just the GM. Now we're pointing fingers at the owner. And if you're going to just, keep running it back with Rich McKay, even though he ain't doing anything, like at a certain point, you have to, cut that man loose and be like, all right, Rich, we appreciate you. You've been here for 20 years. It's time to move on. We're serious, air quotes, serious about, changing the perception of this organization, as Jarvis put it. The Terry Fontenot era, he's made some good moves, but there's nothing that Terry has done that makes me go like, oh yeah, more of this, please. Like, let's sign up for year 6 of the Terry Fontenot era. Like, no, get out of here with that. And then with Raheem, like, even though Jarvis lays out a scenario where like maybe Raheem can buy it, but I'm like, what is Raheem bringing to the table as a head coach that makes me want to give him another opportunity other than, we got to find a way to figure this thing out. Like every week it's the same thing. And then like the clock management stuff, like the part that he is responsible. Like we're watching him just throw timeouts away. Like, hey guys, I never used timeouts at the end of the first half. I finally did it. Like, but why, Raheem? Like just calling timeouts wasn't the problem. It's calling them at the right time is the problem. And he didn't do that. And so I'm like, what is it that you do here? Right? Like, what is it? You're not coordinating defense. You're not coordinating the offense. You're not getting this team to play well on a consistent basis. You can't find ways to win. You consistently mismanage the clock whenever situations are put out there. Hey, you won a challenge yesterday. Great. Congratulations. Like, that is not something that to me makes a ton of sense.
He deserves credit for that, Free. Come on now.
Good job, Raheem. Great job. All right. You found a way to
operational piece.
Didn't the Panthers still wind up converting on that series anyway, so it didn't matter. Anyway, it just I just think you have to clean house. But like I could, to answer your question, T, I could definitely see a scenario where Arthur Blank is like, well, the injuries and if we just can stay healthy, if not for a couple of these injuries, I'm like, all right, man, if that's the choice you're gonna make, but like this is what I'm talking about. This is what gets people to be like, what's going on with the owner? Like, why are you making bad decisions? So I think if Arthur Blank, if you're listening, or if AtlantaFalcons.com intern, if you're listening and watching right now and you can run down the hall to Arthur Blank's office and let him know, just start over, right? Like it's just, there's no point. What are you trying to salvage? What about the last 2 years under Raheem Morris or the last 5 years under Terry Fontenot that you're like, yes, more of this? What? That's what I'm trying to understand. So I say you start over, you give a new regime to come in and basically, okay, you guys figure it out. And then we'll see where you are in 2 or 3 years. And we'll evaluate you at that point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think you guys both make great points about the fact that because we're at the end of year 5 and the end of what seems like 2 disappointing regimes, that's probably a no-brainer for Terry Fontenot, but it may be a little bit more nuanced with Raheem Morris. The only challenge is you gave Arthur Smith year 3 when everybody thought he should not have gotten a year 3, and that didn't work out. That may also be impactful, unfortunately, right or wrong, for Raheem Morris. And one more thing, we look at what Arthur Blank has been doing and how he's been more aggressive in his firing efforts with Atlanta United. And so because they have not won a championship in several years and haven't been in championship form, you got to wonder whether or not he's going to be a little more quick triggered because of how far you're removed from the last time the Falcons were in a playoff situation, let alone in the situation to win it all. We shall see. And we appreciate you guys for being our everydayers and making this show your first listen of the day, especially today with all of the breaking news and all of the reactions that we shared and that you guys shared with us. So be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. And of course, you can catch Jarvis as a frequent contributor for Locked On Falcons. The Falcon Squad Show and Locked On Falcons are both part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We'll see you.